Good evening. We're coming to the moment of truth or half-truths about social credit to find out whether or not the province's honeymoon with Bill Vander Zalm will ever end. But first, here's Ted with a rundown.
Is BC really a silviculture slum? How are the Socreds handling our most precious renewable resource? Webster asks the opposition. Bob Williams, MLA for Vancouver East and NDP critic for Lands and Forests. Premier Vander Zalm says no one can serve two political masters, especially his cabinet members. John Savage, Provincial Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, will have to give up his second job and paycheck as a Delta alderman. He's up first with Webster.
Well, he was to be up first with Webster, but his plane was delayed coming over from Victoria this afternoon, so he'll be up second with Webster, which means that up first with Webster is that hardy annual tough guy of the NDP. Nah, you're not a tough guy anymore.
That's right.
Bob Williams, who is
We're both getting older, Jack.
much older, caucus chairman and also the Forestry critic. Now, where do we start, Bob? Is this honeymoon with Vander Zalm ever going to end? Have you ever seen a premier get such incredibly good press and television and radio and not seem to put his foot in it too much?
No, it is a honeymoon period, and it certainly is in the print press, in the Sun, it seems to me. But fair enough, you know, it's only, what, 4.5 months since the election, and that's pretty traditional.
When do you think the moment of truth will come? What do you think will be the issues that will cause perhaps a bit of an uprising on the left-hand side of the spectrum?
Well, I think the jury's out in a way, and we've got to take Mr. Vander Zalm at his word, at least some of his words. There's just so many words out there, it's hard to keep up at times. But it's such a change after Bill Bennett, and it's such a relief to have apparent openness that I think that's why the honeymoon is carrying on.
Well, let me try you one. I asked the Premier twice, Premier Vander Zalm twice, if he was going to consider, what's his name, Edgar Kaiser for chairman of BC Hydro or any other government job.
Sure.
And I secretly thought Kaiser would get the job.
You mean you thought he was like Brian Mulroney?
Anyway, now the chap who's got it is Larry Bell, a former Deputy Finance Minister, Vancouver. What's the name of the outfit?
City Savings Credit Union, the biggest in the world.
With which you are associated.
Yes, that's right.
What do you think, therefore, asking you a patsy question, of the appointment of Larry Bell as chairman of the BC Hydro?
I have to give him one for that. We stole him from the government, and we felt we took a big chunk of the brains from them when we took him to Van City. He's got back at us, and you know, fair enough. He's a career civil servant, and we hired him when we were government. He headed up the housing ministry and did a good job. He went on to finance with social credit, and we brought him into Van City. He's very competent.
Williams says that Vander Zalm's latest appointment for the BC Hydro is a very competent man and a good choice.
Well, it's a neat question in terms of BC Hydro. It's a tough one to deal with, but it would appear to be a good choice.
And mind you, the job at BC Hydro, except for the Site C dam to be built for the Americans perhaps, has been cut down a lot, that job.
Oh, no question. It's essentially an operating utility. But somebody with Bell's skills, I think, would be needed in terms of dealing with the Americans and getting a half-decent contract out of them if the project were to go ahead.
Do you think it's at all conceivable for that project to build a dam up here, send the power south with all the complications, and get enough to pay back every nickel that we put out from the power down the road?
I think down the road it certainly is feasible, and experts that have looked at it indicate that. My biggest worry is that they will be so anxious to get a deal, to get a project, that they'll take you know, just a break-even position, and I don't think anything like that is necessary at all.
You say even if it means turning down 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000 4 or 5 year construction jobs, we cannot look at it unless it gives us a little smidgen of a profit.
There's got to be a significant payback, and I'm afraid they'll do it for a break even.
You're a man in many parts, though, but when you look at the situation in British Columbia today, lumber's doing quite well, employing fewer people.
Pulp is doing extremely well.
Pulp is making big money for the boys.
Yes, it is.
But
and just today they announced they're going to give a pulp mill a subsidy in their power rates to expand the pulp mill. So, you know, you do wonder.
Then we come up against Northeast coal, though, with all these fearsome words out of Steve Roman. I'm saying hello to
the person that's supposed to be.
Will you wait there for a wee while? Good. Then we come to Northeast coal.
Yes.
And as you know perfectly well, the Japanese are at it all the time, cutting prices, extending delivery dates. Could that go under?
Oh yeah, and you know, what we desperately need is some attention to that one on the part of Mr. Vander Zalm and the government. What they've got to do is jump into the bargaining table and deal with the Japanese with the companies. Right now, the companies are getting whipsawed between one another. One country is getting whipsawed against another. They just signed a contract at Oakey Creek in Australia, the lowest price for coal yet in the world. So they're jiggering down the world price of coal by their actions. And it isn't the kind of free market that it used to be. It desperately requires governments to involve themselves so these companies don't get whipsawed. And we've got, what, $1 billion of public money in Northeast coal. Government should be at the bargaining table to make sure that these companies survive and that BC gets something for that $1 billion.
Oh, the Japanese are too tough for us, though.
But we import cars from the Japanese. They don't want to get involved in a trade war. Their currency, has increased in value by about 50% in the last 2 years, and they're still trying to knock the price down for coal. And yet their currency is giving them their coal at half price, in effect.
So Vander Zalm and the Fed should be saying, watch your act. Don't cut the price or
You
we'll
bet.
stop your cars.
You bet. Government's got to be involved or we're in deep trouble up there.
Well, now, Carney, and you thought her 15% solution was the best we could get?
I thought it was a decent solution in the circumstances, yeah.
Carney calls BC. Now, you were the forest minister for what, 3.5, 4 years?
Short 3 years, yeah.
Short 3 years. She says it's a silvaculture slum. Now, that was maybe just a good ad lib.
Well, she's a journalist. Jack, you journalists sometimes
Go for the fancy
go for the
phrases.
phrase, yeah.
But is it a silvaculture slum?
Sure, parts of it are. Right now, the stuff in weeds is the equivalent of going 200 miles, driving from Vancouver to, Penticton, 25 miles on each side being in weeds. That's a lot. Now that's untended farmland, if you will. Only incredibly rich, wasteful societies can handle that. So that $400 million that Ms. Carney got for us, that we should have got in stumpage, a big chunk of it should have been applied to the forests and creating jobs. Right now, 27% of young men under 25 in this province are out of work.
If you were forest minister tomorrow, how many people could you put to work at minimum wage?
Well, even at a decent wage, you could put 20,000 to work using 300,000 of that, or 300 of that 400 million. 20,000 people. And then there's spin-off. No, I'm not joking.
You're dreaming.
Not at all. That's proposed by Les Reed, professor of forestry, others experts at UBC. They say they could do that, should do that right now, every year.
Back to a couple of other things. One, Harcourt will be acclaimed. Is that correct?
Just about looks that way, Jack. Yeah, there's a genuine consensus in the NDP around Mike Harcourt. Fair enough. Maybe we're coming of age. Who knows?
Yeah. There were some people who thought you might run, but I made money on the fact that I know you're not going to run.
You made a big $5. Good
a
for you.
big $5. Now, let's go to conflicts of interest. You were a cabinet minister and you had no guidelines in those days at all, did you?
No, certainly not initially, I don't think.
Mind you, none of you had any money at the time either. You were all NDPers. Is that not correct?
We came in that way and we left that way, and you can't say that of many politicians.
We used to say that the only guy who'd ever been to a bank to borrow money for a payroll was wee Jimmy Rhodes.
Oh, yeah.
That was probably correct, too.
Probably true in those days.
Now, what about Rogers?
Some of us have gone into business.
I have a certain sympathy with Rogers, with all his family monies, and they're in trust with his brothers and sisters.
It's tough being a millionaire these days, Jack. Tell us about it.
Don't get off the point. Do you think that there's anything unreasonable on the face of it about Rogers' position? Zalm is being quite tough on him and saying he may well have to divest himself of some shares.
It's not acceptable that the minister that has interests in Cominco and Westmin and these others, even through a family trust, it's not acceptable that he should be the minister that decides on park boundaries or recommends park boundaries or decides on pollution and dumping in a lake in a park. It just isn't acceptable.
Same with the Premier himself. He had all his debts and assets before he became Premier. Now, you can't expect the Premier really to dump everything he has.
Well, he said he was going to.
Said he put it in Lillian's name.
And then he said, but he did indicate that he would get out of business. He hasn't done that.
So he's got no conflict of interest, and you're not sure about Rogers?
I think it's a very difficult situation, and I don't think it's acceptable that he should be involved both ways.
I'll tell you something which might annoy you, although I don't know, you're so moderate and reasonable.
There you are. Yeah.
Middle of the road today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my hackles rose when I saw this plan for privatization of provincial liquor sales and the distribution system.
Yeah.
Instead of doing it through the government where you can get your hands on all the profit you can mulked from these dirty drinkers, doesn't that offend you to put it in the hands of privatization, apart from the beer and wine stores we have now?
It's a person that, you're asking the wrong guy that's involved in a bar. But.
Oh, yes, you in a bar, that's right. But seriously, if you were finance minister tomorrow, would you give up all the, or even some of the lolly you get from the provincial liquor sales?
I'd be pretty careful about it. I'd be pretty careful about it, and I think they're going to hold hearings. I think that's worthwhile. But
I must admit, I've never seen you so modestly approval of the government's policies.
There
The
you
honeymoon
are.
is still on. What should Williams and the NDP be doing to puncture the honeymoon? Your calls after the break. Who knows? A whole new political climate may be appearing in British Columbia. It's quite possible. Providing Vander Zalm's careful on his labour legislation, eh?
well, that's right, Jack. Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just wondered, Mr. Williams, you going to cross the floor?
Come on now.
You got
No,
the
it's
membership card yet?
and nothing.
Because,
Come
you know,
on now.
I'm with Jack. You're being even easier on him than I am. He sounds like he's a Socrat backbencher now, which is good because I'm a Socrat. I have never, ever seen
That's
you.
the
I used to
worst
talk to you
insult
all the
I've had
time,
in
sir.
ages.
We used to share the same parkade, Mr. Williams, and my goodness.
oh, yes.
I've never heard you like this.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Maybe you found a voter. Go ahead,
Not so
please.
sure, Jack.
Actually, Jack, I hate to do this to you, Mr. Williams, but I kind of echo those comments. I've talked to you before, and I was very impressed with your moderation. I'm wondering if it's possibly your ownership or running the Savoy Hotel that's turned you into a free enterpriser.
Come on now. No, I think that the jury's out on Mr. Vander Zalm, and we have to give him a bit of time. Let's see what the budget does. Let's see if he's really going to end restraint in British Columbia. We don't want more of the Bill Bennett pattern. It's just a little early to say if Mr. Vander Zalm is really just going to carry on in the Bennett mold or not, and whether it's more just style we've seen the last few months.
I
We'll see.
suspect that it's more style. I think that when it comes to doing the legislation, he'll come out fairly tough in some aspects and perhaps too tough.
Yeah, that might
From
well
your
be.
point of view.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the conflict of interest. I mean, if a man or a woman gives up their business for 4 years, now there could be a lot of bad things happening to their money if they have to give it in a third hand to a third party. And
Well-
I think that's too much to expect.
Just a minute. Under our guidelines, all we have is full disclosure,
That's correct.
plus certain codes of conduct.
And even recently, they've seemed to think that they can get by with putting everything in a blind trust, which isn't disclosure at all.
But blind trust isn't in now. That was only Bennett's recommendation. Now, I spoke to Vander Zalm about it. Full disclosure.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
that was the intent of the rules we brought in, and that's the way it should be. But I think it's generally accepted that there's a price you pay in terms of going into public life, and I think that's one of them. There's some things that you're stuck with.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, first of all, Bob is a right-wing socialist like myself. And now I'd like to ask him why the take-or-pay clause was left out of the Northeast Coal Agreement with the Japanese.
Well, there hasn't been a take-or-pay clause. There's
So
only,
why wasn't there one put in?
well, it wasn't who did that. Bennett did that.
Well, the companies directly handled the actual contract. There's not a bad contract with Teck. The contract with Quintet is something else. And the Japanese have been able to ratchet it down in terms of price. The Socreds told us the prices were all going to go up. They've been going the other way.
Has Teck got take-or-pay?
I think so, yeah. I think
Although they
they're
have
quite secure.
But they have a renegotiation privilege, I know, because every year the Japanese papers come out and they drop the hints. But it should be take-or-pay.
Yeah, no, I think Teck doesn't have a problem, but Quintet does, and it's the larger mine.
Go ahead, please.
Well, Bob Williams, you're a millionaire entrepreneur of no small or mean repute.
Well,
Don't
you're
you
not
think with
not quite
that's
right.
an excellent idea to privatize? Now we get rid of all the fringe benefits, pensions, health plans, and now the LCB can make just clean profits and not have to worry about the cost, eh, Jack?
What we've got to do in British Columbia is make sure we have decent revenues, and our revenues haven't equaled our expenditures for a few years now. What this government has to do is look at the reasonable areas of new revenue. Until you're satisfied that you can balance that budget with decent, legitimate revenues, and I think they're still there in the resource field if you want to go after them, then you shouldn't be looking at privatizing the liquor store.
Well, mining's down the tube, according to that latest task force report by Waterland and his friends.
Well, they're doing the crybaby number, and they don't want to pay anything for anything.
Go ahead from Victoria.
Hi, Jack. Hi, Bob.
Hello.
Let's say I like the new Bob Williams. He looks good that way. And let me draw a parallel on this liquor store privatization deal. If you go back in time a few years, I'm in the automobile business. You remember when February 28th came along, we all lined up like sheep for days on end trying to get your license plates and that. They've now privatized it in the last 5 or 7 years. You can get a plate on a Saturday, you can call your agent on a Sunday, he'll give you insurance, and you're on your way. So I think the liquor store idea is a good idea. It makes sense.
Okie dokie. Go ahead from Mission.
Yes, Bob, I was wondering, years ago, you were in power, and you thought that the Columbia River Treaty was a fiasco and a disaster for British Columbia. I still think it is.
Yes.
And my question is now that West Kootenay Light and Power is being sold to the Americans, isn't there some possible way we could get the thing to be at least taken over by Hydro, even if it costs a tripling of rates instead of a doubling, to keep it in Canadian hands? Now, the whole thing is that we are selling our basic birthright to the Americans every time we turn around.
I couldn't agree more. The Kootenay River is one of the great power sources in North America. It's an incredible, efficient power producer. If it were to be acquired by the local regional districts, they could end up cutting the rates by about 20% or something like that in terms of lower costs and the costs of borrowing and the lack of taxes. That's a significant difference. And that's paying the $80 million that Cominco wants. So it makes all the sense in the world. Those licenses on the river are essentially in perpetuity, so that the idea of transferring those licenses to a Missouri company is really the transferring of a Canadian river to an American.
I can understand that nationalist feeling, but that still doesn't give the American company, whose name escapes me,
Utilicorp,
the right to export power from that dam, does it?
No, that's something else again, but they're currently exporting now on an interrupted basis into the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Williams, last year in public accounts you raised the issue of the Lottery Corporation in Kamloops and their mortgage.
Yeah.
I was in a saloon today, and the Lottery Corporation has started a new program. They're selling tickets in the saloons with people from BC Lotteries, something called Pacific Gold.
Oh, yeah.
One of the new sources of revenue that this government is looking at, casino gambling within the saloons.
Okay.
Is this the only thing that we have left going in this province is gambling?
I think it's pretty sad, and the NDP is convinced that we should draw the line here and now no more expansion of gambling in British Columbia. We don't see that as the growth industry that the government does. We want no part of it. We don't think it has helped the people of Nevada or Atlantic City, that the costs outstrip the benefits. And we think it conflicts with everybody's idea of British Columbia, particularly tourists. And I think the people in Whistler made it clear. They don't want a casino in their town. They think Whistler's something special as
I'm wondering also
it
about
is.
the mortgage arrangement that the BC Lotteries Corporation has with the building in Kamloops. You raised it in public accounts.
Yeah, it never got publicized.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Well, the old Woodward store was picked up by Socreds in Kamloops and then rented out to the Lottery Corporation, and the corporation was told, that's the building you'll rent. They ended up putting in, $7 million in improvements in the building, and the building only cost the Socred buyers $3 million. So they're a kind of locked-in tenant, and that was covered in public accounts.
Sorry state of affairs.
Good. By the way, caller,
Yes, Jack.
I welcome your call.
Thank you. Every couple of days now, Jack.
This guy is a very good caller, but you got to watch him, and he's
you?
on every night.
Really?
Yeah.
You might have him right in this seat one of these days.
A matter of fact, if you want to send me a resume. Bob, no, that was a serious part. The one thing to which you really object is their touting of lotteries, gamblings, and allied social ills.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to fit that with the other side of Bill Vander Zalm in terms of his position on other issues. It's difficult to put it together.
Let's say he's extremely moralistic on certain other issues.
That's right.
And we don't have to talk about that tonight, thank goodness. My thanks to Bob Williams. I can see an air of reasonableness for at least the beginning of the legislature until the bills come in.
We're willing to try, Jack. We think it would be better for British Columbia if it can work that way.
And will Harcourt be the pro tem leader from the first day?
I think so.
And then he'll be crowned at the convention in April.
Call it what you will.
Enthroned. My thanks to Bob Williams.
Thanks.
And I shall be back with John L. Savage, the Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries in British Columbia, after the break. This is a new face for the Webster Show. I have not interviewed this politician during a campaign, and he is John L. Savage, Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries in the Government of Victoria. You are a farmer yourself.
Yes, I am, Jack.
And, said he, raising a delicate question, you are moonlighting as an alderman in Delta.
Yes, the issue has been raised. It's been in the media the last 2 or 3 days. The reason I did not step down, Jack, as an alderman was the commitment I made in November of 1985 when I ran as an alderman. I committed myself to work on behalf of the people, to do my best on their behalf, which I have always endeavored to do. And the reason I did not step down was the fact that it would have, in some way or another, cost the taxpayers of Delta the cost of a by-election. And unaware of the fact that under the guidelines of conflict, even if you're in a position where you could be perceived to be in conflict. Now, to me, whether that's passing judgment prior to the fact even happening, but I have been very careful.
Oh, I can see that, how as an alderman you could be in conflict on policies for Delta, which might directly contradict the policies of the provincial government. But you could solve it by, no, would it solve it if you didn't collect the 2 payrolls, 2 paychecks?
No, I think it's more the business that comes before Delta Council as compared to that which comes before the government of BC. Certainly there could be provincial matters that would come to the Delta Council table where if I made comment on or passed judgment on, I could get myself in conflict.
So you're going to stay as an alderman until June the 1st?
That's correct.
That's your plan?
Yes.
Now, agriculture.
Yes.
I went through some of the stuff today. We have a dozen marketing boards.
Yes, we do.
And the commonly held belief, and you've got wide experience in farming, BC Federation of Agriculture, all kinds of it. You also look after the milk board.
Yes.
There's a commonly held belief that the marketing boards do nothing but hold people up to ransom. Are you planning to do anything about breaking up any of the marketing boards?
Well, I don't think the people are being held up for ransom. The marketing boards are the supply management systems as we know them that are allowed to happen within the province. The milk board is the one that is controlled by the provincial government. Certainly all the other boards are those that are allowed to happen under the National Farm Products Marketing Act, which is federal jurisdiction.
Oh, like chickens, cranberries, eggs, grapes, hogs, mushroom, tree fruit, turkey,
that's
vegetable
correct.
marketing, sheep and wool commission,
Sheep and wool is a BC one.
and oyster marketing board. These are all BC ones.
These are all established under the National Farm Products Marketing Act, which is a federal act.
And they're established for the basic purpose of maintaining the price at the proper level.
No,
Oh,
no, they're not. That's
Oh.
not the reason a supply management system is there. What is commonly not realized is that in most cases, the products that are under supply management are highly perishable. About 91% of the product we're dealing with in supply management is in fact very perishable. And in some cases has a shelf life of much less than 7 days. Now, the reason that we have supply management, and I believe the first one was in 1935 when vegetables first went in, was the fact that we had a far exceeding supply of a perishable product that was rotting. You can imagine having a surplus of fluid milk that you would either have to put into further production into skim milk powder, cottage cheese, whatever byproduct you wanted to put it in. Then you get the mountainous supply situation, if you left it wide open, that the United States and the EEC now faces. And just if I may use the United States as an example, we had a 700,000 off milk production because the supply was so high the cost was unbearable.
no, I can see that. Now, what about our thoughts about it and turning it into some kind of cheese? Are we getting done in the eye on that by the federal regulations?
Okay, I think that's a fair comment, Jack, because the provincial agreement, there's an agreement across the country under the Canadian Dairy Commission, whereby the provinces all agreed to a formula that the 65% of the milk production would go into the fluid system, 35% would be into industrial production.
Right.
So that is only the guidelines. Beyond that, there is an agreement that that industrial sector shall be divided amongst all the provinces. That's the basis of the federal control. Fluid milk, as I mentioned earlier, is under provincial jurisdiction. Industrial is the federal one. BC has 11.63% of Canada's population. We have 3.6% of the industrial milk supply. That's the very thing that we are making a case for in Ottawa.
In other words, we should have 11 or 12% of the industrial production, and then we could sell more of our surplus industrial milk at reasonable prices for the producers.
We could also, Jack, I could go and look for other markets for those producers. We could enhance the capability of those producers and more producers to get into the business.
Now, let's go to something else. Mr. Vander Zalm's been talking about a meat plant for Prince George of Vanderhoof.
Yes.
2,000 cattle and 5,000 hogs a week. Does that make any sense? I mean, do we need 2,000 cattle more into the marketplace? And what would you do with 5,000 hogs a week?
Well, right now, Jack, we presently produce approximately 23% of our red meat production, and if I can be more specific, the beef sector alone. So there is ample room for enhancement of the production base. The thing is...
You mean selling in the market?
That's right. So what we need to do is realize that if you bring this packing plant in, the money in to build the packing plant at either Prince George or wherever they decide to locate, then you've got to have the supply to meet the demand of that packing house. If they want 2,000 cattle a week, and I believe it was 5,000 hogs if I recollect properly, we do not have that production right now.
But look at the trouble Gainers and the other big plants have had to cut wages, long strikes. Is the industry healthy enough, or are we healthy enough to consume this stuff?
Well, as I say, if we're only presently producing domestically within BC 23%, why shouldn't we be endeavoring to try and get up to more self-sufficiency within the province, which turns economic dollars over?
Oh, sure, providing we don't subsidize that meat plant, for instance.
No, that's not.
And then the other one, which sounds, I don't know if it's pie in the sky or not, the agri-fuel plant, that's ethanol.
That's correct.
How real is that at the moment?
Well, as we phase towards the unleaded fuel days, which I believe is 1991, we're to take out the leaded fuels, just on the safety aspect for health reasons. Ethanol blended with methanol makes good sense. That's the reason the provincial government took a look at the proposal. It's approximately a $90 million proposal under phase 1 of construction. And that will involve quite a number of bushels of wheat out of the Peace River District. In
Is
fact,
but is that firm or is this still grain in the sky or pie in the sky?
if you throw grain in the sky, you hope it comes down to something worthwhile. And I believe, really, that there is potential there. What we've got to establish is, are there contracts available to see that that particular product can be
Is there
marketed?
somebody willing to put up the $90 million for the ethanol plant?
The Wedge Corporation in the United States is willing to put up $45 million, which is the company that will undertake to construct it.
And are we putting up the other
operate it.
45?
It'll be done by federal tax credits.
Federal tax credits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you take the grain and you turn it into fuel.
That's right.
From how many acres would you take the grain?
We have about 700 to 750,000 acres in grain production in the Peace River, and the wheat production on that base would be considerably smaller than that, but it enhances the opportunity for the farmers to grow into either soft wheats that are higher yielding, and then you have the enzyme breakdown, of course, of the wheat.
So we might see that one day.
Yes.
Soon.
I think the go-ahead on that will come through very soon. It's up to the Wedge Corporation to agree with what has been proposed.
Okay. Let's try and get some calls from farmers. I always forget that there's a large farming audience out there.
Mm-hmm.
After the break. Just by the way, how many years has there been farming in Delta?
Well, the first farming in Delta that I understand took place was back in 1863, Jack.
So that's 1963. It's a long time ago.
That's correct.
Well over 100 years.
Yes.
I'll take you first. Go ahead, please.
Hello, John. I'm glad you're on board. I know you well.
Yes?
I'm not a small farmer, and I'm not a vast farmer. I'm sort of a half-vast farmer. But what I'd like to say are two things. One, I just listened to Bob Williams, they've put in legislation that you have to prove beyond any question of reasonable doubt that you are absolutely useless in private life before you can become a cabinet minister.
What are you talking about? For goodness sake, make some sense.
Can we do something about this problem of the milk with the federal government?
Okay, he got his question in.
Okay, yes. Let me assure you that I am undertaking discussions with the federal minister. We've instructed the Canadian Dairy Commission to be more flexible. We see opportunities offshore to market Havarti cheese, some of our mozzarella cheeses, and it seems to me shameful that we can employ BC people with the opportunity to create economic dollars within the province that we don't capitalize on those. So that's why I'm undertaking discussions with the federal minister to give BC a much greater share.
Is it the Canadian Dairy Commission that gives us our allocation of 3% instead of 11%?
It's under their jurisdiction.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Savage. I'm glad to hear that you're planning to produce some good, cheap, clean fuel such as ethanol and methanol out of agricultural crops. Another thing I'm wondering is if your government is at all trying to cut back on the use of pesticides, herbicides, and chemical fertilizers, because it's not a good idea, I don't think.
I fully concur with you. We are looking at intensive pest management issues, IPMs. That would be the ultimate thing that we should be looking at, and minimizing the use of chemicals. That's correct. No, that is certainly a goal of mine.
Go ahead, please.
Three quick ones. Mr. Savage, are we being considered in the free trade talks as it relates to BC farmers with Americans' ability to produce 2 and 3 crops a year?
Yes, we are. I think that's a very fair question. In discussions on free trade relative to agriculture, we must appreciate that in some areas in the United States we get 12 crops a year off of some commodities. In BC, there's a couple where we can get 2 or 3 off, but the fairness must be considered in any trade discussions.
Right.
I think BC farmers or Canadian farmers can compete on just as fair a basis, if that's the way it's judged, and just as competitively and efficiently as our neighbors to the south.
Didn't know that. Go ahead, please.
Question number 2 on fisheries, your other side of your portfolio.
Yes.
We have in the Fraser River Delta estuary area a tremendous amount of bureaucratic hassle for urban shoreline owners. Is there any opportunity for the federal fisheries to be more cooperative with provincial fisheries in having a better hands-on system here?
Well, can I just tell you, I can't issue an awful lot of details, but Mr. Sidden and myself are under discussion to draft up an agreement between the federal government and the provincial government where we can have more control within BC.
You're involved in agriculture too.
Yes.
You know, it seems a bit odd and a bit unstable, that industry, doesn't it?
Well, it's in its fledgling stages at this particular point, Jack. As you can well appreciate, we had a moratorium established October 31st that was issued by the Premier, whereby we saw fit, because of the carte blanche licensing that was going ahead through my ministry. It wasn't mine at the time, mind you, but certainly then on to forests and lands. Now, what we have since done when that moratorium was put in place is take an in-depth look, and also through the Gillespie report where the hearings were conducted.
I sometimes wonder if we've got the right waters here, if it's not too warm, the waters. Remember all the big kills you've had up there, which from what they say is, I don't know, pollution.
I think, Jack, you've identified one of the key things. The water quality, the flushing ability, the environmental impacts, the recreational uses of the water, commercial uses, and so on.
But it's not no place to go in and make a quick fortune, is it?
No, you're going to be 3 to 4 years getting into it.
Establish incentives for greenhouse industries and hydroponics. Are you going to give me a subsidy to grow tomatoes hydroponically?
No.
What will the incentive be?
The incentive will be to try and find a market for them. That's the incentive.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, we're a corporate farmer, and we have a bunch of land in the prairies. We're boasting about 65,000 acres. Why is it that a person like myself, if I want to get a large feedlot, and we're planning on somewhere around the 10,000 animal per month bracket, why a person like myself we have around 300,000 bushel in Saskatchewan sitting in bins, why I can't bring that grain into BC and feed it to my cattle?
You can bring it in as it's designated for feed purposes. There's nothing stopping you. The Wheat Board District in its jurisdiction has jurisdiction over Canadian feed grains and Canadian export grains.
Because if we can do that with no hassle from the government or whatever, we might be able to fill that processing plant. Because if we can have our beef processed cheaply, we can. I can't see why BC shouldn't have all the beef it can use.
Okay, let me recap that. You've got 65,000 acres in the prairie. You've got 300,000 bushels of feed, you say, on the prairies.
Yeah.
You'd like to establish a feedlot here to run 10,000 animals. Have I got it right?
Right.
But you say that you can't send the 300,000 bushels out here.
Another producer tried doing that, and
what do you want this guy to do?
No.
They were taken to court. They went to Supreme Court, and
lost.
Supreme Court judge said I could not rule against the government, and he was talking in behalf of the Wheat Board.
Okay, hold on.
I think your statement isn't quite correct. He can't rule against a law that exists. Government only establishes laws. I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, to send the details of your particular concern to my office, and I will certainly follow them up. And give me all the pertinent information, because as far as I understand, the requirements for British Columbia feed grains are listed through the Canadian Livestock Feed Board. The feed board then allocates out of the prairie pool of the feed grains that can come west, east, or wherever their designation point is.
Obviously, he's going to do much better if he can bring his own feed from the prairies to his own feedlot. Will you do that and let me know how you get on, will you?
I will.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. That was interesting, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Go ahead from, where am I? Fraser Lake.
Hello, Jack and Mr. Savage. Mr. Savage, I'd like to know, first of all, where is this tremendous production of livestock to come from for this proposed plant in Prince George or Vanderhoof? We're tremendously interested because it's in our area. Mm-hmm. And how is the government planning to enhance the ranching industry in some way?
Well, can I answer your first question, where is it going to be produced? That hasn't exactly been established at this stage, but I am of the assumption from early discussions with the partners in this proposal that the Bulkley Valley area, south to Williams Lake, as far as Williams Lake, north to the Peace River, are the areas they wish to see the drawing area. My understanding is that there will be a feed plant built possibly in the Vanderhoof area. So, you know, all that sort of says to me that perhaps that is the Bulkley Valley area, is the area they wish to establish a feedlot. I might say that I was in Yuma, Arizona, where I walked through a feedlot down there. It had in excess of 100,000 cattle. That's more than BC consumes in a year.
Thank you. Go ahead from Kelowna. Go ahead. Which one was that? Am I on the wrong one? Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you.
Jack,
Yes.
the thing that I would like to suggest to Mr. Savage is that here we are in BC, and at every turn we get hosed by the federal government one way or the other. In other words, we are only allowed to produce, say, 3% of the total milk in Canada. We have 11% of the population. And I feel what we should do, and that's not only milk, I think it's in every other product that we do, is we should tell the federal government that as of January the 1st next, we are going to produce our equal share population percentage that we have in Canada. And they had better adjust the other places to match it, because we have the right to produce enough to feed our own.
Okay, I think it's fair comment. There's a lot of frustration in the industry, but if you can appreciate that in 1972, when all the provinces agreed to grow under this program, the industrial milk in British Columbia was not making the producers an awful lot of money. They opted to stay with the fluid system. Now that's partly the reason why we don't have as much market share as we should. But that doesn't belittle the fact that when we have market opportunities, that we shouldn't be pursuing them, and that's why I'm going to the federal government asking for a greater share. If we do not get that share, we have the option of opting out of the federal program.
That'd be difficult.
It'd be difficult. It'd take a year and a half, and we'd have to give a year and a half's notice, but
okay.
that is an option.
My thanks to John Savage, the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries. I don't think I've had two less controversial television interviews about politics, one after the other, in a long while. Bob Williams, the very soul of grace and elegance, and John Savage, the new boy, who sounds very bright. Free for all, because it's Friday night after the break. Whatever became of Jack Monroe? We haven't had his loud, mellifluous presence around for some time. Just as well, I say on occasion. But he phoned me up this afternoon because he wants help with a little commercial from Webster. You know, a couple of weeks ago, the IWA sold these chopped up alderwood at $5 a pickup load or something. Well, tomorrow, the IWA sale for Rick Hansen, and all done, you know, freebie labor, freebie everything. All the money will go to Rick Hansen, 100% of it. And there's going to be a handyman sale. All the wood products have been donated for fencing, doors, bifolds, window frames, the lot. And this will be on tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at BC Forest Product Mill in Marpole at the foot of Heather Street. So if you want bargains and wood products to help the Rick Hansen Fund, be there. Starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely. Everything says Monroe, and you can believe most of what he says for the home handyman. Free for all. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Yes.
The figure for Elliott Lake of the people died for cancer, what was that?
30% of miners.
Okay, but did you also know that the town of Elliott Lake is built on a low-grade uranium mine deposit?
Yes, and many people were very concerned about the radon gases, and I think the government actually moved in and did something about it. Did they not?
I'm not sure. When I was working back there 5 years ago, I was watching them build these houses, and they just level the rock off. You can see the ore, and they build their house right on top of it.
I think they did, as a matter of fact, though. I'm not quite sure. Oh, but I'll find out for the next time you call me. And by the way, we're on Channel 4 in Fernie this week, so welcome to Fernie. If it's the first time you've seen this handsome aquiline face, count your blessings. Go ahead, please.
Jack, I hear that you're a mutton puncher from Salt Spring.
That's correct.
What's your idea about the marking boards? Because my attitude is that it's very close to communism, because it's just the opposite of free enterprise.
Well, there ain't no sheep marketing board, I can tell you that.
You're lucky, because I think cattle are about the only thing that haven't been under the hammer so far.
Yeah, but I would remind you of something. While we are a more expensive country in which to live, We are a much more civilized country than the country to the south.
You got that right.
When I see 37 million Americans who are unable to get decent medical care, and the charity hospitals are in great trouble, and the private hospitals for profit are closing their doors, 37 million Americans with no proper health care. How can they say they're the greatest, freest country in the world? Freedom to die of your illnesses without sharing of the burden among all the population. So never forget that about Canada. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello. I've just been reading about the planned logging of Windy Bay in the Queen Charlotte, and I was wondering if you had done a show on that or if you had planned to do one in the near future.
Done a show. I started the whole thing a couple of years ago when I went up and stood on a stump. As a matter of fact, I have questioned both Kempf. I questioned Kempf about it the week before last, and he assures me that the logging in the Windy Bay will not touch the ecological preserve. I am one of these people who sees no reason why, apart from Windy Bay, Lyle Island can't be logged.
Well, but I mean, in regards to Windy Bay, I mean, with the federal government offering $12 million.
$12 million is a bagatelle. There's hundreds of millions of dollars invested in the products of the 3 tree farm licenses, which include part of the Charlottes. You want to close down all the mills? Go ahead.
No, but also in this article I was reading, it said that Windy Bay encompasses only 1/10% of all the loggable land in BC.
You can twist it. On the other hand, there's another 650 square miles of beautiful untouched ecological preserve on the west coast of the Queen Charlotte, which the environmentalists never will admit exists. Go ahead, please.
Jack.
Yes.
Jim Jones here from the BC Correction Service.
Hello, Jimmy.
I just want to give you an opportunity. I've watched your program for many, many years, and I just want to give you an opportunity to come out and do something positive in corrections for a change in terms of going through all the riots and stuff like that. This year, the Yellowwood River Correctional Center is going to put into the water nearly 1.5 million salmon. And I thought I would give you a unique opportunity.
What, 1.5 million what?
Salmon.
Salmon, huh?
And I thought I would give you a real nice opportunity to come out and change your whole venue in terms of corrections in BC.
Where is it? Where is it?
Out at the Yellowwood River Correctional Center out at Haney.
And the inmates run it?
And the inmates run it under staff supervision.
And when are they going to put it into the river?
Well, we'll be putting it in around the end of April.
Give me a shout and I might come out and see you one day and do a little television thing on it.
Well, I just want to give you the opportunity to come out and talk to the inmates in terms of how they feel about working on a program like this. I mean, we've gone through the rhetoric of going through the BC Penn disaster in Ocala and so forth and so on. I thought you'd like to come out and do something positive for a change.
Jimmy, give your phone number to Jeanette, will you?
Sure, I will.
Hold on, don't go away. I've lost it. I haven't got my glasses. I've lost him. Where was he? Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack. I would like to speak to you. I had the misfortune of being picked up by the police in my own residence a week ago.
Okay, you were picked up by the police. You had the misfortune. I'll talk to you off the air because I've got to go to my final break right now. Sometimes I wish I could use nothing but off-the-air calls. Some of them are fascinating indeed, to say the least. Monday, Tony Brummett, Minister of Education, and Bonnie Spence-Venge on the consolidated guidelines to prevent sexual abuse in the schools. Serious, important, gotta watch. 5 p.m. Monday, precisely.